So, I was on this site for teenagers 13 through 19 where it was a little like Tinder in terms of swiping, but I really wasn't, you know? I did end up meeting some cool people there though. There's a verification they do so that only teens can use it, but they do it with pictures. I was 14 when I was using this app, so I met this guy, Dimitri, and his thing said he was 17. He didn't look the greatest, not at all, but it's not like I was gonna date him or whatever. I just wanted a new friend. We got to talking. He moved over to Snapchat and Skype since the app was kinda buggy. Then we got to late night talks. I started telling him a story. We eventually started role-playing with those characters, and Dimitri was clearly trying to get the two into a sexual act. Obviously, this was making me uncomfortable. I don't want to roleplay a sexual scene with the dude. Why can't our cool magic boys hate each other? So I finished the story my way, despite all of his attempts to bring it over his way, and moved on. He pressured me into a lot of pictures. Not sexual, just pictures, but it was still uncomfortable. He asked for a lot of photos. He also pressured me into Skype calls, but I only did that twice because I was too uncomfortable with it. Now, I would be fine with this, like, it's really not a big deal. But then, we're talking, and what does he say? I wish you were older. If I dated you now, I would be in trouble. I was low-key confused. A 14-year-old and a 17-year-old? That isn't illegal per se. It only becomes bad if, well, you know. I didn't verbalize this. I was more focused on bringing the conversation back to normal. He then says, quote, I can't believe someone as amazing as you would hang out with an almost 30-year-old man. When I read that, oh boy. He always looked a bit older, but I didn't know he was 30. This was a huge shocker to me. What do? Do I chalk it up to a typo? Maybe he put the wrong number in. He must have meant almost 20, right? Why didn't he correct it? Well, obviously he didn't notice, or he expected me to realize he meant 20. This was the first relationship I had in a while, so I was scared to end it unless there were really a reason to. I was too much of a shy guy back then to make any friends. We started playing Truth or Dare, and he started asking sexual truths. Now, I still thought he was a teenager, like me, so I literally couldn't care less about this. However, he asked me what one of my sexual kinks was. I told him I liked being called a certain thing, and then he started calling me that. I was trying to bring it up to him and tell him, hey, this is fucking creepy, don't do it. But again, I was a shy guy. Then he mentioned that he was going to his parents' house. I asked him if he had a house of his own. He said yes, like, not a dorm thing at a college place, a proper house. At 17? Nope. He had to be lying. We had moved to Discord by now, so I just told him I was deleting the other stuff, which I did, and now my online/offline status ball thing is set to offline 24/7 because I don't want to be rude by ignoring him whilst I'm online or blocking him without explanation, but I also don't want to speak to him because speaking to him after such a long time just to tell him I'm blocking him is rude, so I guess this is my life now. I was going to report him to the site, but it seems he's already been removed. So creepy guy who's definitely not 17 like you advertise, please take the hint so I can put my online/offline thing back to normal and never talk to me again. Cheers. "6 years ago, I was a new mom, learning to balance my job, family, and health. My social life primarily existed on the internet at this time, and Facebook and Instagram were the main ways I kept in contact with others. I received a friend request from Steven, an old friend from high school. I accepted, and everything was normal for a while. After a couple of months, Steven sent me a DM asking how I was. The conversation was fine, but it didn't take too long for me to realize that this wasn't the Steven I knew. They had the same first and common last name. His profile picture was not a picture of himself, so I never realized he was a different person. Either way, we had several mutual friends, and he didn't do anything especially creepy, so I left him on my friends list. He would occasionally message and chat, and he just seemed like someone that was a bit socially awkward but harmless. I would respond, and kept conversations brief. One day, I got a text from him, which surprised me because I never gave him my number. I asked how he had gotten my number, and he said it was from my website, which was fair. I am an artist and had my email and phone number listed on my art site. He began texting several times a day, and I would give short responses followed with something like, "At work, talk to you later," or "Dinner with the fam, have a good evening." He started talking about his new boyfriend, saying that he was one of the few gay conservatives, and things were going well. I told him I'm glad that he has a partner that aligns with him and wished them well. He then began talking a lot about conservative politics and was aggressive about it, and I told him I was a liberal, so it was probably best we didn't have those conversations. His messages began turning sexual, where he would ask if I wanted to hear about the sex parties him and his boyfriend threw. I told him no. I didn't really know him, and it was inappropriate. One day I was busy with work and returned to my phone to see dozens of messages from him, angry that I wasn't responding, and he went on and on sharing very graphic sexual stories. I responded and told him I'd been polite to him because he seemed like he didn't have many friends, but this was too much and I was going to block him. I told him that I didn't believe he was gay, and he was just saying it in an attempt to make me think he's harmless. I proceeded to block him on social media, and I blocked his phone number. A couple of days later, I started getting lots of friends requests from accounts that I didn't have mutuals with, and no friends on them. I knew they were probably fake pages that he was creating. I would block them and then move on. Then I began getting phone calls and texts from the fake numbers. Same thing, I would block them and move on. I messaged our mutuals to ask how they knew about him, and none of them knew him. He had just requested them and they accepted. He began sending requests to my friends, family, and other women in my dance troupe. I let everyone know that they needed to block him. For months, not a day passed that I would not get a weird call or friend request or DM. It would range from a normal "how are you" to vague threats of "I could make you talk to me if I really wanted to." He lived several hours away, so I wasn't particularly concerned. Things got quieter, until one evening my notifications started going off like crazy. My phone was ringing with unknown numbers. It was on my art page. Probably 15 different accounts had posted sexual content on my page, or things saying I'm a whore or is a thief. I knew it was from him because he also accidentally posted from his real account. I didn't realize that I never blocked him from that page. He also sent a message to my art page saying sorry for that, and he misses his friend, and he was just trying to get my attention. I didn't respond. I blocked him and called the police. Since stalking and harassment laws are awful, they didn't do anything. Later that night, I woke up around 2 a.m. for no reason other than I was just having trouble sleeping. I was up for a while playing on my phone when I started hearing a strange sound coming from the living room. It was back and forth between quiet cracking and scratching. At the time, we lived in a large ranch house, and the living room was on the other end of a long hall. I got up, thinking that my cats were into something or maybe after a mouse. I flicked on the living room light and the sound stopped. I scanned around looking for my cats when I noticed an open window. Our windows were large, from floor to ceiling, and opened by pulling them down from the top. The top of the window sill had pry marks and the lock was broken. Thankfully, this house was old and the windows did not open easily, and he had only been able to open it about 8 inches. I woke my husband up, got my son out of his room, and called the police. I knew it was Steven. It was too big of a coincidence that he blew up that day, and then someone tries to break into my house at the middle of the night. We couldn't prove it was him. There was no evidence other than what happened that day that pointed to him. The police spoke to him, and I believe that it scared him enough to leave me alone. I was obviously horrified at the time, and I began looking up anything I could find out about him. I wound up finding his YouTube channel, which solidified my fears for him even more. He posted rants, where he would get angry and angry until he was red-faced and nearly spitting. He frequently talked about violence and would show off his gun collection. This led me to finding his real last name. I googled his name and found out that he had been arrested 2 years prior for holding a woman against her will in a hotel room. Thankfully, she was able to escape with only a bloody lip. We moved to not much longer. I wanted neighbors and to be off the farm. I removed my phone number from my site and locked down all of my social media. I still sleep with the baby monitor in my son's room because I'm so scared of someone coming in at the middle of the night. His YouTube channel was shut down after a bit, and I haven't heard from him since. So Steven, I hope you wound up in jail, and let's not meet. Back when I was 16, I'm nearly 27 now, I briefly dated a guy named Tyler for what was maybe almost 5 months. We broke up when my mom's job moved us 3 states away. We were young, and I didn't want to maintain a long-distance relationship while I was trying to adjust to moving from what had been my home for 10 years and starting at a new school. We stayed casual friends until a mutual told me that he'd begun spreading gross rumors that he'd, quote, popped my cherry before I left, and after I called him to confront him, he had admitted to it. I told him I never wanted anything to do with him again and blocked him on Facebook and his number from my phone. I didn't even spare him a second thought until 3 years later. I just moved into my first apartment with my boyfriend of 2 years and 2 of our friends. I had a job I loved, a great relationship with our roommates, and it was an ideal arrangement for all of us. One night, I'd opened my Yahoo account for the first time in a little over a year from my desktop rather than my phone app, and immediately I had an instant message from Tyler. I'd forgotten that back when I used the desktop version frequently, my settings had me automatically log into the messenger, and I hadn't removed him from my contacts. But now, we were both nearly 21 and had done a lot of growing up, so I assumed Tyler was probably grown up too, and was initially comfortable catching up with him. He'd always been a bit awkward, but I was too, and the conversation was fairly pleasant, the usual, how have you been, and whatnot. With me doing most of the talking since in comparison, I had had more opportunities granted to me where I lived, now compared to my and Tyler's hometown, where he still lived. Eventually, we signed off since I had work the next morning, and while I wouldn't have considered us being friends again, I was happy it was civil, but then he started getting weird. Eventually I added him back on Facebook, and he would randomly send me messages about going through my pictures and liking how much I had, quote, grown up and what a woman I'd become. At first I brushed it off as awkward compliments, but then he started talking about the things he wanted to do to me, sexual things, and I firmly reminded him that I had a serious boyfriend and how inappropriate his comments were. He would apologize only to do it over again the next day. I got sick of it and blocked him again. I told him on Yahoo that if he didn't stop, I would be contacting the authorities. It was a bluff meant to hopefully scare him, and it worked for a few hours before he decided to send me a message detailing the violent sexual things he wanted to do. At this point, I was beyond annoyed and disgusted, so I told him that if he ever contacted me again, I would send the screenshots of everything he'd said to me to his very Christian mother, who was graciously letting him live rent-free with her. I blocked him on my Yahoo account after that, and never heard from him again, assuming he was now out of my life. Oh, how I wish. Fast forward a few years, I'm 25, happily married, and my husband and I just returned to the States after living in Japan for a few years due to his military career. Shortly after we got settled into our new place, I took a trip to my hometown to spend time with my family and catch up with a few friends. Over coffee, a longtime mutual friend of mine and Tyler's, Amber, divulged to me that Tyler had been cyber stalking me. Okay, I thought, but that's not really anything serious. I had nothing to hide from anyone. I was blissfully happy, but she started going into detail. I had moved 3 times to 2 different states, and then to Japan since I'd last spoken to Tyler, and was now living in a 3rd new state. And Amber said each time I moved, Tyler would suddenly talk about wanting to attend university in whatever city I'd moved to. When I moved to Japan, he claimed to be saving up to a vacation there, specifically the area we were stationed in, rather than a place like Tokyo or any of the other big touristy cities. It was weird, to be sure, and Amber had told me she knew Tyler was stalking my Facebook under a fake name. He openly admitted it to her, but he would never tell her the name he used. She was really concerned about his behavior and admitted she was only still in touch with him because of it. In truth, apparently he'd become infamous in our circle of mutual friends for being a creep and sexually harassing several women, successfully chasing all of them off. I felt uncomfortable with the knowledge, If her timeline of things was true, he had been keeping up with my movement for nearly 6 years, but what could I do? Neither of us knew what name he was using, and if all he was doing was following me and where I moved, I didn't think there was any harm to it, beyond just creeping me out since he was very unlikely to be able to afford to travel to wherever I was at the time anyway. I went home and eventually forgot what Amber had told me since there really wasn't anything I could do about it. I wasn't receiving any harassing emails or text, so out of sight, out of mind. Months had passed and I went to work as usual. I was a hostess at an upscale local restaurant, and one night a coworker, a fellow hostess named Gina, said, "Oh, hey, you had a friend stop by here yesterday." Friend? I'd moved here nearly a year ago by now, but the only friends I had were my coworkers. When I asked who, assuming it was a regular that I was friendly with, I felt my heart stop when she replied, "Tyler." I asked if she was sure, and she vaguely described his appearance, assuring me that she'd told him I was off that day, and that she didn't know when I worked next. Hiding my panic, I claimed to not know anyone named Tyler, and that maybe he was looking for a previous employee. My first name was really common, and excused myself to the bathroom. Sure enough, there was a message from Amber when I opened my phone. She'd come home from work to see a Facebook post, which she screenshotted and sent to me, about a friend of hers and Tyler's visiting the city next to where I lived, which is a huge tourist attraction, and Tyler had gone with him. The restaurant I currently worked at only had maybe 7 locations scattered in various areas surrounding the tourism hub, each with a company name and an add-on depending on the specific location in town to make them easy to find. The coworkers I was friends with would tag me as, quote, checked in with them on Facebook when we would have drinks together after work, and it seemed Tyler had used them to find which one I worked at. Terrified, I spoke to my manager and told him everything that Amber had told me, and that Tyler had apparently showed up looking for me, and blessedly, he let me have the following day off. I still had to finish my shift. We had no one available who could cover for me to go home, but he gave me tasks that kept me away from working at the front door. And since it was a slow night, Gina let me go home first after I'd fill her in on the situation. I immediately called my husband when I clocked out, and he picked me up rather than let me walk home like I usually did. Thankfully, my husband had decided to switch military branches, and he would have to go to training for a few months, and we decided that it would be better for both of us if I had moved to his town to be near our family. I gave my job a 2-week notice the next day, much sooner than planned, but my manager already knew I was moving away and understood that I probably wanted to quit now rather than later. It's been 7 months since then. I'm happily living near my mother-in-law, literally on the opposite side of the country from my hometown and our last location, and had a close-knit little group of friends in our apartment complex. But I did a complete overhaul on my Facebook settings. No one can tag me in any location or picture without my manual approval, and my current location is unlisted to anyone not on my friends list. Amber still has Tyler on her Facebook, but she says they rarely speak anymore after he was recently served with a restraining order by a mutual friend of theirs. Seems I wasn't the only person he was stalking, and I'm not surprised given the stories of him that had been floating around our old circle of friends. I still get a little anxious, especially when I remember how close Tyler came to finding me, but I still don't understand why he's kept track of me for so long, and I don't think I ever want to know. On mobile, sorry for any formatting issues. So a long time ago, I had a falling out with a friend who liked to cyber harass people she didn't like. Because I knew this, I took precautions on all my social medias and added the 2-step verification where it would send codes to your cell phone if someone tried to log in or change your password. Seems like a safe step, right? I never thought about it any further until a few days ago. I get an SMS text from a random number that addressed me by my full name, which freaked me out a little, because the spelling of my first name is pretty uncommon where I'm from. No big deal. Maybe it's just an old friend who changed phones. I gave the classic "who dis" back at them, to which I received an even stranger text back. "Oh my goodness, it's you. Are you 18? I have something I need to cash app you." Well, that's weird, I thought. Probably just some scam hack to get my cash app. I said again, "Who the fuck is this?" And I never received a text back from that number. No less than 5 minutes later, I get 3 calls and 2 spam voicemails from different unrecognized phone numbers. Then a text, "Pick up the phone, my full name." That's alarming. I immediately took screenshots. I had my boyfriend call from his phone, but no luck. I blocked the number and hoped that was it. Maybe 30 minutes later, I get 5 calls from a new number and a new, even more alarming set of texts. "I'm a 40-year-old man and I'm in love with you. I will keep trying to reach you until you respond. I won't stop." I immediately blocked the number and called my parents. Then within 2 minutes, he made a new number and texted me again. "Wow, I just want to talk to you for 5 minutes. I'll even pay you. But after that, consider me gone." Again, blocked. I alerted my boss. Then the text stopped. After work, I filed a police report and bought a baseball bat and set up some security alarms in my apartment. My first instinct was that it was a guy who I recently worked with who had been fired for sexually harassment. One of my friends / coworkers who is good with tech stuff changed his phone number and texted the number pretending to be me on a burner to get some more information out of him. It was a bit of a long conversation, so I'll sum it up by saying the guy basically wanted me to talk on the phone while he, well, you know. He called the fake me 26 times and got no answer, so we stopped trying. We went ahead and assumed that that was the end of it. The next morning, I get a text from a new number again. He was claiming to be one of my friend's fathers. I started to freak out. Both of my parents and my boyfriend were at work, so he sent his mom over to calm me down and stayed with me while I was alone in my apartment. I called my phone and she answered, and all he said in his super creepy raspy voice is, "Please," and then abruptly hung up. I was having a full-blown panic attack at this point, so she called the police department and had an officer come out to update my report. She was still texting the guy while the cop was there, and once she told him law enforcement had been contacted, his whole story changed. He said he doesn't know me or anything about me. He doesn't even live near me and means no physical harm. He's just a lonely guy who got my phone number from Facebook and decided to harass me. I remember this wrong, but I could have sworn I had my phone number set to private, but I know I still had it up there because of the 2-step verification. I recently posted something on Facebook Market, so I'm assuming that's where he found me. I've since deleted that account and changed my phone number, and nothing else has happened. Posting this here is more or less a warning to anyone who has that 2-step verification set up. Please double check right now and make sure you have the most private settings possible for everything. I'm not going to set up all that stuff with my new phone number. I'm not going to risk giving it out anywhere online. Creepy dude from the internet, let's never meet again, or I'll bust your fucking kneecaps in.